Anyone that has been terminated at the FBI has been done so
the
because
question
they failed
again,
to meet the muster
Director,
and their constitutional
I will
obligation.
work on the audio-visual capabilities.
I'm going to borrow your terminology and call bullshit on your entire career in Congress.
Reclaiming my time,
it has been
Director.
a disgrace to the American
Director, I'm
people.
reclaiming my
You
time.
can reclaim your time all you want.
Mr.
Chairman, you're going to allow a witness to speak.
Eric Swalwell created a moment that everyone in that hearing room will remember for the rest of their lives. Not because he raised his voice, not because he put on a performance for the cameras, not because he delivered some explosive theatrical outburst. What he did was far more unsettling than any display of drama. He calmly opened a folder, locked eyes with Kash Patel, and then he asked a question crafted with surgical precision, deliberate, methodical, backed by documentation that left no room to maneuver. Every word felt measured, intentional, inescapable. The atmosphere shifted instantly. This wasn't the polite silence of people waiting for a response. It was the heavy, breathless stillness that falls over a room when everyone realizes they are witnessing something that was never meant to unfold in public. And in that suspended moment, it was clear. There was no walking it back. It was the kind of moment powerful figures had spent years and untold resources ensuring would never unfold under public lights, the kind of reckoning carefully buried beneath procedure, delay, and sealed files. And then there was Kash Patel, a man who enters hearing rooms like he's already read the final page, a man who has sidestepped every attempted takedown Congress has thrown his way, a man whose political brand is built on one core promise: he does not crack. But this time, there was no pivot. No polished counterattack, no carefully engineered line to redirect the blow. The words simply didn't come. What filled the room instead was silence, and the unmistakable sense that 15 years of suppressed records had just forced their way into daylight. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story doesn't end with that hearing. It's unfolding in real time, and you'll want to catch every development the moment it breaks. Stay with this until the very last second, because when Swalwell reads those words aloud, when the folder finally opens, the look on Kash Patel's face says more than any statement he's made over the past 11 months. It's there for a split second, but it tells the whole story, and I'm going to break down exactly what that look reveals. But before we get there, you need the full context. This didn't begin today, it didn't even begin this year. What happened in that room this morning was the final pull on a thread that stretches much further back than most people realize. So let me set the stage because the setting matters. Senate Judiciary Committee, afternoon session. Officially labeled a routine oversight hearing, on paper it was about budget allocations, staffing updates, the usual procedural choreography that fills C-SPAN airtime and clears out the gallery seats, the kind of event Washington runs on autopilot, except this time, it wasn't routine at all. That's what it was supposed to be. Patel's team got the agenda 3 days in advance. Standard briefings, routine oversight items, nothing that signaled danger, nothing that suggested disruption. On paper, it looked like procedural maintenance, the kind of hearing you prepare for on autopilot. What they didn't see, what they couldn't see, was buried in the language. Tucked inside a request that read like generic congressional phrasing, Swalwell's office had pushed for a shift to open session. The justification sounded harmless enough, ensuring transparency in federal law enforcement oversight. Inside Patel's circle, that line was likely skimmed, categorized, and dismissed as boilerplate political messaging, the kind of standard positioning both parties use. They'd seen it dozens of times before, but this time they miscalculated. Not slightly, catastrophically. Because Eric Swalwell is not just another member of Congress filling a time slot. He's a California representative, a former federal prosecutor, a lawmaker who spent 3 years as a lead impeachment manager during the first Trump impeachment proceedings. And when someone with that background quietly asks for an open session, it's rarely routine. Eric Swalwell doesn't push for open sessions to score political points. He does it for one reason: to lock a witness into answering on camera, in public, on the record, where there's no room later to claim the exchange was distorted, edited, or taken out of context. He wanted transparency in its rawest form. Every lens focused, every microphone live, every syllable preserved. Now we understand why, but before I tell you what was inside that folder, Before I explain what Swalwell read directly into the congressional record this afternoon, I need you to consider something. At some point, you've probably asked yourself why the Epstein files have taken so long to come fully into view, why each effort to release them seems to collide with the same invisible barrier: national security, ongoing investigations, privacy safeguards. The wording changes slightly, but the outcome never does. The same explanations, the same procedural slowdowns, the same reinforced wall. You probably assumed the explanation was complicated, something buried inside layers of bureaucracy, a maze of agencies' redactions and procedural knots too tangled to unravel. That's the easy assumption. What Swalwell revealed today suggests something very different. The answer isn't sprawling, it isn't abstract, it isn't hidden inside 1,000 pages of technical language. It fits inside 19 documents, and every one of those documents carries the same name. But we're moving too fast. To understand why this moment landed the way it did, you have to rewind back to February of this year. 11 days after Kash Patel was sworn in as FBI Director, his office issued an internal directive to the Classification Review Board. It wasn't a standard procedural notice, it was an order for an expedited review. Not routine, expedited, which means it bypassed the normal timeline. It moved to the front of the line. It was flagged as urgent. The subject of that review, all Epstein-related materials referencing, and this is the exact phrasing from the directive, current and former government officials and their close associates. Swalwell's legal team didn't stumble onto this directive through a headline. They found it buried where almost no one looks, in a footnote. One footnote. 7 lines. Tucked inside a 47-page FBI legal brief responding to a Freedom of Information Act appeal. Most readers would have skimmed past it. His team didn't. They marked it, isolated it, then they pulled the thread. They filed a separate motion demanding disclosure of the directive itself. It was denied. They appealed. They went back to federal court. This time they secured a partial disclosure order, and then they spent 6 weeks reconstructing what that directive had actually set in motion. What they uncovered was not abstract. It was a list. 31 documents were reviewed under the expedited order. 19 were reclassified, 19 documents that had previously been cleared for public release under the prior administration's declassification process. Records the public had been told it would see, reversed, restricted, and pushed back into controlled status. Pulled from daylight, returned to shadow, and here's the detail that detonated the room. The piece Swalwell walked in prepared to substantiate. Every single one of those 19 documents contains references to Donald Trump. Every single one. Pause on that. Not a handful, not a majority, all of them. 19 documents, one name, reclassified within the first 60 days of Kash Patel's tenure as FBI Director. That's not randomness. That's not paperwork gone sideways. That's a sequence, and sequences demand explanations. So the question Swalwell carried into that hearing wasn't theatrical. It wasn't layered in rhetoric. It was direct. What's the explanation? It's the same question Patel could not answer. Patel entered the room the way he always does. 3 attorneys behind him, 2 aides at his side. That posture, shoulders squared, chin slightly raised, the controlled pace of someone who has walked into enough high-stakes hearings to stop flinching at them. He settled into the witness chair, organized his folders with deliberate calm, exchanged a brief nod with the committee chair. If anything, he looked mildly detached, almost uninterested, like a chess player sitting down at a board he believes he's already mastered. The first 45 minutes did nothing to disrupt that confidence. Other committee members took their turns. Budget allocations, staff restructuring, surveillance guidelines, familiar territory, predictable lines of questioning. Patel moved through it with the precision of someone who's rehearsed the choreography 100 times. He answered the version of each question he preferred, not necessarily the one that had been asked. He projected cooperation while conceding nothing. He let the clock drain without ever appearing evasive. It's a skill, and you don't navigate Washington's machinery as long as he has without mastering it. You could see the cadence, the comfort, the subtle lean back after each exchange, the almost imperceptible reset that signaled, that one's done. On to the next. Then Swalwell reached for the microphone, and the temperature in the room shifted. I've watched enough hearings to recognize the difference between a lawmaker performing for a headline and a former prosecutor zeroing in on a target. It isn't about volume. It isn't about visible aggression. It's in the focus, the stillness, the kind of attention that doesn't wander, because it already knows exactly where it's going. A stillness more threatening than motion, the kind of patience that signals absolute clarity about exactly where the next 5 minutes are headed. The room registered it before Swalwell spoke. Even Patel did. His shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. His eyes flicked toward his attorneys, just a fraction of a second, then back to the microphone. He sensed the shift. He just didn't yet understand its shape. No one did, except the man holding the floor, Director Patel. Swalwell's tone was calm, controlled, almost cordial. I want to discuss a specific group of documents. Patel gave a small nod, settling into familiar terrain. Of course, Congressman, I'll do my best to assist the committee. Stop there. I'll do my best. Swalwell didn't miss it. I'm not asking for your best, he replied evenly. I'm asking for the truth. Let's find out if those are the same thing. That was the first incision, subtle enough to miss if you weren't watching closely, but I was watching, and I saw it, Patel's jaw tightening just slightly, barely 2 millimeters. Enough. Because in that moment, Swalwell had done something deliberate. He separated assistance from truth on the public record before a single page had been opened, and quietly challenged Patel to choose which side he stood on. Patel chose. They always do, and Swalwell anticipated it. That's why it was the opening move. Director Patel, I'd like to discuss the classification review your office initiated in February. Specifically, the expedited directive issued to the Classification Review Board on February 11th. Are you familiar with that directive? No hesitation. Congressman, classification reviews are routine procedural mechanisms the Bureau undertakes regularly as part of its responsibility to balance transparency with... That's not what I asked. The interruption wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The room went still. Are you familiar with that specific directive? This time, Patel shifted in his chair. Not dramatically, just enough to register. If you weren't focused, you'd miss it. I wasn't blinking. I've been briefed on the general nature of our ongoing review processes. General nature. That's classic Patel. An answer that carries the rhythm of substance but delivers none. Structured to sound responsive. Engineered to reveal nothing. Swalwell didn't let it breathe. He opened the folder, slowly, intentionally, the way a trial attorney introduces an exhibit when the evidence is about to speak for itself. No theatrics, no rush, just control. He removed the first document and lifted it high enough for the cameras to lock in. According to this directive, partially disclosed under federal court order last month, the February review was specifically aimed at Epstein-related materials referencing current and former government officials and their close associates. He let the words hang. Then he looked directly at Patel. That's not routine. That's targeted. Who determined the scope? Patel's eyes moved to his legal team. One of them adjusted in their seat. Patel raised a hand. Just slightly. A minimal signal. I've got this. He turned back. The directive you're referring to was part of a broader initiative to ensure compliance with privacy protections for individuals not charged with any crime. Any individual, Swalwell repeated evenly, regardless of political affiliation. Privacy protections apply to any individual referenced in those materials, Patel replied. Swalwell gave a single nod. No reaction. No visible pushback. Then he reached into the folder again. This is where the tempo changed. The second document wasn't policy language. It wasn't interpretive. It wasn't procedural framing. It was a list. 31 documents reviewed.